Okay, fantastic. So here is what we are going to do. So this presentation I titled Expanding Voices. And so with this presentation, my goal is to not only report on practitioners' perspectives of student athlete development across not only institutional classifications, but athletic classifications, but to also afford the chance to have this be a real live collaborative experiment. Okay, and so again, thank you so much to LSU for having this presentation available. And just a couple people I'd like to thank before we get this started. I want to thank Dorothy Kemp, Walt Holliday, Samantha Webb, and the entire LSU family for allowing me to present some work that I am really passionate about, benchmarking and communication. I want to thank my program director, Dr. Brenda McKenzie from Vanderbilt, for kind of inspiring this project that birthed out of my practice of student affairs class. I want to thank Scott Dayton out at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, for allowing me to continue working with student athletes remotely and give me some fuel for this presentation. Dr. Paul Downey at the University of Kentucky for continuing to be a great mentor and providing some inspiration for the project, and the N4A research committee for allowing me to get a really solid test run with this presentation. So just a little bit about me before we get started. My name is Zach Weinstein again. I am an FSU alumnus, and I completed my degrees in sport management and English, and I'm currently at Vanderbilt. Just a little bit of work I do on the side. I am also a remote student athlete development consultant for Bellarmine University's athletic department, where we will be running some really exciting programs at the end of March. And I also do athletic academic tutoring part-time for the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, also remotely. And just in the past 2 weeks, I also recently accepted a full-time position with Coastal Carolina University, where I will be an academic coach with their academic coaching experience department. So if you're coming through Myrtle Beach anytime after June 1st, come say hello. I will be here. And there is also my LinkedIn as well. And that's also in the chat in case you want to chat about these topics any further. So here's a little bit about the format we are going to take for this presentation. So I titled this slide, "What's the format?" And so with the format, we're going to talk about the positionality, not only of college athletics and of higher education, but kind of the intersections and the vice versa that you see between these two entities. We're also going to examine programming avenues taking place not only in Division I institutions, but we're going to be looking at everything. We're going to be looking at life skills from the lens of NCAA Division I, II, and III institutions. We'll be looking at some intersections from NAIA institutions at the Division I and Division II level. And you'll also be hearing some perspectives from some fantastic practitioners in the NJCAA, which is the National Junior College Athletic Association. With this presentation, there will also be some fantastic intersections with institutions that have HBCU classification, some of those that are members of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, so religious identifying institutions. And we will also have another Christian identifying organization. And so ultimately, we're going to come away with some nuggets. So I hope you all are hungry, and this might inspire you to go actually get some nuggets, but more importantly, some nuggets for practice. And so I put this cute little picture over here of some takeaways that we will be arriving at later. And so here's the nuggets. And let's get into some more nuggets, okay? So let's talk about the positionality of higher education and college athletics and vice versa. So I put this really cool quote that I have in my the report that I wrote that accompanies this presentation, which I would be happy to share out and talk to more people about at the end of this. And so rather than a standard of eligibility maintenance, athletic academic practitioners should maximize opportunities for athletes to participate in educationally purposeful activities to prepare them for life after sport. So kind of prefacing this, in practice, Otto et al. Acknowledge that this implementation is often squeezed because of these athletic constraints oftentimes, especially at the NCAA problem. And so when we think about athletics, we tend to think of it in this, I'm sure plenty of you have heard this, in this front porch dynamic. So it's not the most important room in the house. at times, but it's often one of the most visible. So there's a lot of eyes on us and what we do in this profession at all times. And so it's super important that we're doing really great things, but also recognizing that athletics comes with the good, the bad, and everything in between. And so athletics is a constituency, it's a collective experience, and it's intersectional. So not only does it involve the spaces, the buildings we work in, whether they're standalone spaces or whether they're part of student affairs sections of campus. It's a collective experience. This involves practitioners. It involves your student athletes. It involves the experiences that they share, from athletic highs to experiences of trauma. This involves your personal lives, and it's a constituency. It all works together, and it kind of manifests differently depending on where you are. And so again, we'll be looking at NCAA institutions in all three divisions, and JCAA institutions, and both divisions of the NAIA. And so what I have here is yet another food diagram. And so the ways we're going to kind of look at how programming manifests is we're going to consider student athletes' experiences, but for this presentation, we're especially going to be looking at the experiences and perspectives that athletic academic practitioners such as yourselves might be bringing to the table. So we'll be looking at, if you look at the sandwich diagram over here, we're going to see how programming, we're going to see how athletic classification, such as the NAIA, the division, the intersection that they might hold. So whether they're an HBCU, for example, some of their partnership channels, and where practitioners' perspectives all intersect. So think of it like this hamburger over here, okay? And so the steps that I took with this report and that I hope will inspire future research are, I captured areas for enhanced programming. Okay, so I had done a literature review and I arrived at some really great areas to benchmark. I framed them into interview questions. So I framed them into questions to report back to this report, but I actually called up and solicited volunteers through like snowball sampling and random sampling. And I interviewed 11 professionals with 203.5 years of combined experience, which is a pretty incredible display, I would argue, which definitely helps with the validity. And I think just the future research with this kind of project. And then I arrived at some interesting implications for both program facilitation and collaboration. So let's kind of get into this, okay? And so this table demonstrates some of my findings that I arrived at on communication. And so when I interviewed the professionals, I had asked the same question on communication to everyone. And these were some nuggets. This was one of the nuggets I arrived at, that the most detailed approach that I, in my opinion, that I saw came from this NCAA Division III model, where they actually had a 4-year progressive curriculum devoted to communication topics. So I'm going to give you all 10 seconds. I'm going to admit this person real quick. I'm going to give you all 10 seconds or 15 seconds. If you want to take a picture of this, screenshot it, whatever you want to do, okay? I'm going to give you 10 seconds, take a picture of this, screenshot it, write something down, whatever you want to do, okay? Fantastic. So as you're writing these things down, or you're seeing something maybe that you like, or seeing something that strikes you, I want you to take another 30 seconds and I want you to go into the chat. And because you all have your institution in your tag, this will kind of give everyone a chance to gain a perspective of what's maybe something that your athletics department is doing really great when it comes to communication. So that might be something that's going on at LSU, that the LSU student athlete development folks are doing regarding communication-based programming. So I'm going to give you, again, another 30 seconds to pop something into the chat. And then this will give a chance for everyone to kind of get this benchmarking chain rolling. Okay, so as you guys are starting to use that chat, just some interesting things that I found when it came to communication-based programming were especially this Division III model, where they actually broke it down, year by year as to what kind of programming that they were doing for underclassmen students and upperclassmen students. So in their first year, for example, they did identity development programs and personal advancement. For their second year, they really had a focus on social responsibility, civic engagement, and community service, and kind of how communication worked from those type of programs. In that third year, they did communication around career development, alumni connections, and leadership theory. And then for that fourth year in communication, they really had an emphasis on peer mentorship and senior to freshman mentorship. So some really great communication things going on here, but there was also some really notable findings and some really fantastic examples from other locations. So from the Division I level, from the Power 5 intersection, they really had a good professional communication focus, which the mid-major shared as well, and the HBCU. And so the HBCU had a fantastic program where they used the authentic leadership model as a frame for communication-based programming. And they also mentioned that coach to student communication was very important there. At the Division II angle, they had curricular angles. So communication was really coming through a curricular stance. So the institution actually had a communication class that they were getting their student athletes set up in. So I think that was another really interesting programming avenue. At the NAIA level, they also took a curricular approach and a coach to student communication approach. But in addition, they also really highlighted their campus intersection. So campus programs such as SGA positions and mentor groups, to some stuff that they were doing from a departmental focus. So a social media seminar and workshops. At the NJCAA level, same thing as the NAIA level, it really followed this curricular approach with students' coursework. And at one institution, they also had curricular pathways such as a student leadership class, a cornerstone speech course at another institution, and campus trio programs. So again, I'm going to give you another 5 to 10 seconds to drop stuff in the chat. So you guys will be able to download those and take some inspirations with you for the road, some nuggets, if you will. Give you another 5 seconds to take a picture, and then we will arrive at the next theme. Okay, fantastic. Let's go to table number 2. So this theme and this interview question encapsulated professional and career development. So the nugget that I took from this was, and I quote from my report, 2 impressive locations were the NCAA Division III institution and the NCAA Division I HBCU institution. And so my findings from professional and career development, as far as student athlete development programming, were as follows. So just coming from the ones that I thought were very impressive, which I put in red, at the HBCU, they did an especially pertinent job at using identity-focused programs. So they were taking their student athletes to the Black Student Athlete Conference, Black student athletes and non-African American student athletes. So I think they were doing a really fantastic job as far as highlighting those identity-focused programs. And at the Division III level, again, the Division III level was really impressive to me with these incremental opportunities. So not only taking the time to develop a resume, cover letter, elevator pitch, but having a focus on internships, game-changing internships, and this transition piece through this 4-year progressive curriculum. The NCAA Division II level, I also thought had some really great and honestly some pretty unique programming they did with professional and career development. Just from the benchmarking I did and the institutions I connected with, they were the only institution, and I only had interviewed one institution for the NCAA Division II model that had Zoom networking opportunities with athletic academic professionals. So I found it interesting that they were actually forwarding student athletes kind of to this profession. So just some other really great highlights. And again, feel free to take a picture of this table for programming inspiration. And while we're going through this, if you would like to put something in the chat that your institution or one of your colleagues does at your institution towards professional and career development programming. So I'll go through this and I'm going to let those cycle through the chat. And so at the NCAA Division I Power 5 level, they did a really great job with in-house programming with their supports in place, and they had really great campus partnerships with career services as well. And so at the NCAA Division I mid-major institution, not only did they share campus partnerships with career services, but they had additional professional and career development programming through etiquette dinners and a professional development institute that they created in-house. At the HBCU Division I institution, again, those identity-focused programs I think were critical, especially considering some traumas that student athletes might be facing, or considering, just our political and, American climate and just some of the crazy stuff that's been happening with police brutality and anti-Asian violence. And so these are incredibly important in the years and months to come. They also followed with campus partnerships with career services. And they also had an institution-hosted career combine, which I thought was pretty fascinating and a really great workshop at that. At the NCAA Division III level, not only did they have these incremental opportunities again, but they also shared that campus partnership with career services. So all of these institutions and the NAIA institution were doing a really great job and communicating across campus, avoiding those athletic silos, getting outside the box. And so the NAIA institution had a really neat partnership where they actually had a community partnership for professional development with JCPenney. And they gave discounts to student athletes, seeking professional dress, or, they did workshops with them. And at the NJCAA level, some findings that I arrived at were that the NJCAA institutions did a lot more outsourcing, and they outsourced to both campus and community partners for programs such as career seminars. And so we're seeing really great things here in the chat, and I just kind of want to direct everyone's attention to that. Thank you for those of you that are putting those programming pieces in the chat. So I'll give you all another 10 seconds if you want to add anything else to the chat or take a picture of these findings from professional and career development. Okay, let's keep going. So arriving at the finding from leadership, I had asked a question on kind of how leadership manifests with student athletes programming. And again, these perspectives are coming from the athletic academic practitioners' perspectives. So these are the professionals that are reporting back about the programming they are doing and that they believe student athletes are experiencing. And so the nugget that I arrived at from this was that a skillful leadership approach came from the HBCU institution with its developed 10-week leadership series. And so the NCAA Division I institution at the Power 5 level had some really great things that they did with leadership as well. And so they actually infused their leadership opportunities with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and made a point to state that that was the first thing that they had mentioned as far as their leadership opportunities. So I found that incredibly impactful. The NCAA Division I institution at the Power 5 level also had social media workshops and leadership. So they kind of wrapped this into their leadership training versus over here, where I'm trying to figure out where, it was another institution on here that had used social media workshops with their, I can't seem to find it. So we will come back to that later. Okay. Yes. So social media workshops, they wrapped into their leadership programming. They also, which I found interesting, had team specific models for leadership. So their leadership programming for football student athletes was different than for women's basketball student athletes or for tennis athletes. And so most institutions had some equivalent of SAC or Student Athlete Advisory Council. The NAIA called them something a little different. They called them SALTs, so Student Athlete Leadership Teams. And again, at the Division I Power 5 level, they also had a really great presence of multiple leadership assessments. So they were using proven assessments and taking student athletes through those within their programming ventures. At the mid-major Division I institution, they also had SAC, but the leadership boards I felt were mostly for older students, which was interesting. And that's kind of what I had perceived, and also the professional from that institution had put down. And so again, what really impressed me at the Division I perspective from the HBCU was they actually put this into a 10-week speaker series. They developed this speaker series and had reflection components for that. So again, speaker series with reflection, which was something that was incredibly important when I was considering which pieces of this leadership topic really impressed me. At the Division II level, they also had SAC, but what I found super interesting was this right here. I'm going to put a little arrow next to it, was these in-house internships. And so those in-house internships were, I think, incredibly important. And I just found it interesting that the Division II level was really bringing student athletes into not only kind of learning about the intersection of higher ed and athletics, but they were also, getting some of them that were interested, these in-house internships. And so they also had leadership workshops from the NCAA that they were using with their programming. So ready-made programs, but tailored, of course, to their institutional constraints. At the NCAA Division III level, similar to the Division I level, they were using a leadership assessment called DISC assessment on leadership style and theory. And they also had their own leadership institute. So similar to how the mid-major institution developed a professional development institute, the Division III location developed their own leadership institute. At the NAIA level, leadership as far as programming manifested through a leadership course through general curriculum. So they did it from a curricular angle. This was super interesting. They actually had a SAC equivalent for coaches due to the NAIA Champions of Character approach. So I thought that was incredibly interesting that they were really putting the ownership on the coaches to do their own leadership, to participate in their own leadership development and take agency of that. Again, they had student athlete leadership teams, which are similar and equivalent to SAC. And they also had conference leadership opportunities. That was something they mentioned that was really providing the extra leadership oomph. And so at the NJCAA level, campus organizations became incredibly important as the resources were considerably stretched over there and spread thin. So campus organizations and leadership through those became incredibly important as athletic academic practitioners, pivoted student athletes towards, hey, go participate on campus, get involved with your local organizations and be a leader through those. They also had team-centric responsibilities and forwarded a lot of their leadership through community service, which is going to be another theme we come to later. So again, I'm going to give you 20 seconds to either take a picture of this, find a nugget that you really like, either write it down or make note of it from that picture. And I'm going to give you a couple seconds to put in the chat something that your institution or one of your colleagues within your department does regarding leadership programming. Okay, so I'm going to give you about 20 seconds to do that now. And I'm going to check out this chat. Again, thank you for everyone who is commenting in this chat. It looks like you all are doing some really great things with your student athletes. All right, how are we feeling? Temperature check. Everyone feeling good? All right, perfect. Let's keep going. I'm gonna check this into the chat. Thank you for popping that in there. Let's go on to the next topic. And so this next topic was community building. And so I had framed the question about how do you build community? How do you induce community within your athletics departments? And so one finding that I arrived at that I thought was quite interesting is that the NJCAA institutions were incredibly adept and incredibly proficient in building community. And so the NJCAA institutions experienced an especially strong affinity towards community building as community college institutions. And so just going over some of the findings that I arrived at from this. So at the Power 5 level, there's some really great, I think some really robust programming as far as how they built communities. So not only did they have SAC, like many other institutions in here, or SALTs, but they also encourage for those of student athletes with religious identification or religious identities that they wanted to formulate into their development, membership in the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. This was a really important thing that they had that a lot of students took membership opportunity and advantage with. And so it was super interesting to see that kind of being pushed as well. So they also had a DEI student athlete board, an alumni task force, and reflective breakout groups. So I think this was really important, again, getting to this reflection piece that is always super important to, track the metrics for these programs. Like, are these programs working? Are they not? What do we need to change? And this I thought was really interesting as well, mentoring for female student athletes. So additional mentoring for female student athletes. So I think that was a really great program that I really did not see a lot of the other institutions taking advantage of. And so team-based opportunities, I did see a lot of institutions taking advantage of with this benchmarking. So coming to this mid-major institution, the institution really pushed on-campus involvement for community building. So getting out of the athletics building and getting to other on-campus spaces. So whether it be community groups on campus or otherwise, this was a real big push from this department. From the HBCU location, team-to-team relationship building seemed to be the highlight of their community building efforts and programming. So they really emphasize, okay, you're with your team. Like these are the opportunities you're going to get to do with your team. And we want you to build relationships with your team's constituents, your coaches, your teammates, all of that, your advisors, all of that. And so that was very important to the HBCU location. At the Division II location, they also had SAC and mentioned SAC, same as Division I. And they were also very much with this team-to-team relationship building, but they mentioned that team bonding often came through a community service orientation, community service lines. So that was the finding I arrived at from that. At the Division III level, not only did they have SAC, but they also had extra subcommittee group locations. So they had a DEI subcommittee, a communications subcommittee, and a community outreach subcommittee, which I thought was interesting. So they really put their student athlete leaders in charge of the community building process and gave them the agency to do so with these subcommittee groups. So it'd be interesting, I think, to track some of the metrics on those and see how successful either the additional mentoring for female student athletes is, or these, the extra student agency through the subcommittee groups. At the NAIA level, they also pushed these student athlete leadership teams. They push on-campus involvement similar to the mid-major institution. And the community service participation, I think, was a really big thing at not only the Division II level, but especially at the NAIA and then NJCAA level. And the NJCAA level, while this was really their main component of community building, I think they had probably the strongest affinity demonstrated towards that aspect. And so again, I'm going to give you all 20 seconds to take a picture of this. I'm going to put some more arrows on programs I want you all to take note of. And if you would be so kind, if you would like to pop anything into the chat, I think it's beneficial for everyone here to see kind of what's going on. The goal of this is not only to showcase my findings, but for you guys to start connecting and seeing, am I doing this here? Would this work at my institution? And really start to get the wheels spinning on that. So I'll give you another 20 seconds to come through, take a picture, and post something in the chat related to this programming avenue. Okay, give you all another 5-10 seconds or so, and then we'll keep going. Okay, fantastic. So I'll let you keep filling in stuff in the chat from that. Let's keep moving onward. And so differentiating community building from community service, I found some rather interesting findings from community service. And so not only did I balance this metric from my findings, I balanced this metric from the amounts of reflection I saw taking place with this as well. So what the nugget that I really garnered and that I really gleaned from this question and the findings from this was the jump to community service learning could be improved across the board with more reflective opportunities for students. So what I really saw from this, which I think everyone should take note of, is probably one of the biggest nuggets of this presentation, was the amount of reflection taking place. So what I noticed just briefly was not a lot of institutions were putting reflection to the test. They were getting community service, they checked the box, but they weren't getting quite the jump to service learning. So the difference between community service and service learning is just a deeper connection to it. So community service is me, Zach, I go do 10 hours of community service. I read to first graders for 10 hours a semester with my team, the baseball team. Okay. Versus the service learning component is not only did I get to read with the team, but I talked about this and SAC. I talked about this with my team and my coaches. I got to reflect with my advisor. I got to do a survey afterwards. My athletic academic practitioners, whether it be my advisor or student athlete development professionals, or even assistant ADs and heads of athletic academic centers, balanced the research and did the research on the metrics. Are these working? And so I think there was definitely a jump being missed that could be improved. And so just kind of coming into the findings from this, what I found at the Division I Power 5 level is that there was no shortage of opportunities. So there was community opportunities, on-campus opportunities, student athlete driven initiatives. So the student athletes were picking, hey, we like this initiative, we want to participate in this from a community service angle. And there was also conference opportunities. But one thing I discovered, even with a glorious amount of opportunity, was a lack of direct reflection. So that is just something to be aware of as you consider these type of programming opportunities. At the mid-major level, the Division I mid-major level, they had community opportunities and on-campus opportunities that they pushed student athletes towards. But again, a lack of direct reflection with athletics directed activities. But what I did find, which I thought was super interesting, was a direct reflection component with on-campus activities. So campus was getting a reflection piece with this, but the athletic department was not, getting the jump on that. With the HBCU location, there was definitely team-to-team relationship building and community service activities, but again, a lack of direct reflection on activities for all student athletes. So we're seeing a pattern here. But they did do direct reflection with SAC. So I'm going to put a star next to that. I'm actually going to put a star next to this one too. Okay, so coming over here to what I found at the NCAA Division II level, there were opportunities through team-based community service activities and projects. And again, these team-based activity amounts differed. So some institutions, for example, were doing, a certain amount of hours per semester. Some were doing a certain amount of hours per team. Some of them were doing a certain amount of hours for the department total. So if you would like to read kind of a better breakdown of that, please feel free to email me or shoot me a LinkedIn message or shoot me a text. I dropped all of my information at the top of the chat. You can come to that at any time. And so sorry, my stamp is being a little difficult. Again, at the NCAA Division II, even though they had team-based community service activities and projects, again, a lack of direct reflection. They were not hitting the service learning component, and how do we know if these opportunities are working? If student athletes really like it, they might tell us that they're liking it, but what are they getting out of it? Are they able to come back and reflect on this later? Is this going to help them in a job interview? Where are these reflections going? Okay. And so at the Division III location, there was an abundance of departmental community service opportunities, and they had some direct reflection. I'm going to put a check mark here with some direct reflection because they did a little bit. But again, this was only happening with SAC and one of these SAC subcommittees. So it was only the upperclassmen in this location that were being asked to reflect or given the opportunity to really, reflect in a more formalized setting, whether it was through conversation, surveys, or otherwise. So underclassmen were missing out on that. At the NAIA level, which I thought was interesting, team-based community, there was an abundance of opportunities and even some opportunities from that intersection of religious identifying institutions. So they had team-based community service opportunities. They had opportunities through on-campus organizations, of course, and they also had mission trips, which I think was a really great opportunity for those students with religious identifying identities. And so what I thought was really great, you're going to see me pop this big star right there, 2 stars, direct departmental reflection opportunities for coaches and students. So not only were they getting the students' reflection, but they were getting the coaches' reflections. And so that dual reflection component really, I think, made the jump to service learning. And they did a very good job with that for the most part, because of their NIA Champions of Character framework, they had not only had the coaches getting involved, but giving coaches and student athletes that agency component with this reflection piece. And so at the NJCAA level, they're really the biggest thing, which makes sense given the institutions I saw, was these community-based partnerships. So the institution would partner with a community organization, and I found mixed findings at this level. So one institution had direct reflection built in, while 2 institutions experienced indirect reflection. And so I'm going to put a question mark over here under indirect reflection. And so as we kind of think about that, what I found with the indirect reflection was, one of the individuals I had interviewed, they happened to be an athletic director at their institution. They said, a student athlete might come back after the fact, after they were done with their athletics experience and their education and say, I really enjoyed this activity. This was really great. I do this now, and, that helped me in my job interview, or that helped me, consider my community as an important thing, and consider community service to be a part of my life. And so that was indirect reflection, which I found was interesting. I mean, it was some great things going on. The indirect reflection was good. But as far as a direct reflection built in, where they had the practice to do that, only one institution had that, so the ability to kind of see the metrics on that. So overall, from this finding, I think just not having that reflection makes it hard to measure if these impacts are working. So I'm going to give you an additional 20 seconds again to take a picture of this, see what you like and what you don't like, or maybe find, pinpoint a finding that's interesting to you. And then I'm going to ask that, I know some people are doing really great in the chat, but I'd like to see more of you guys in the chat. I want this to be collaborative. The goal of this is to see what's going on everywhere. So if you're comfortable sharing, please feel free to pop stuff that you all are doing towards community service and towards service learning into the chat. I'm going to give you all 20 seconds to do that. Okay, give you another 5 seconds to take a picture, to write down a finding or so that you found interesting. Okay, I'm going to clear these and let's keep moving on. And so this finding over here, I did a question on social justice. And so the nugget that I garnered from this component was one response that stood out to me came from the NCAA Division III institutions model. So not only did they have proactive staff development trainings and but they had a fortified campus with the multicultural student affairs office. And in addition to those, a department-specific action statement. So 3 things I saw that I really enjoyed that says, hey, we care. And so just kind of summarizing the findings on these, at the Division I Power 5 location, the institution had a DEI subcommittee, or a DEI committee, I'm sorry. They had symbolic maneuvers. So they were doing a game day patch on uniforms, for instance. They had student encouragement. So, just indirect, informal, hey, if you want to get involved in something, you do it. That sounds great. They had adaptive programming and they also had reactive programming. So as they saw what things were changing, they built programming into that. If there was police brutality events going on, they adapted to that and built programming in regarding that. So they were very adaptive in their programming, but they were also reactive in their programming. So maybe they weren't on top of the ball. Maybe they weren't quite keeping a pulse, on higher education and the world and the news that was going on. And so some programming, the professional admittedly said was reactive, to kind of attempt to account for those things that were happening. So not a bad thing, just a locational piece that I noticed. At the Division I mid-major location, they were doing a really great job with staff to staff conversations. So they were getting the staff together and having all of the staff there say, what's going on in our community? Are these issues we have to be worried about? What's the case on mental health? What's the case on this topic? And so they were doing a great job having the staff communicate with each other. And then through this, they also had really great coach to student conversations. So the coaches and the students were having really great dialogue and having the chance to reflect on social justice issues, for instance. At the NCAA Division I HBCU location, they were also taking this, I think, a step further, and they were moving it and having on-campus conversations, which I thought was really great. So not only were they engaged within athletics, but they were also really engaged on campus as it was an HBCU institution. So I think that location had a really great tie to, okay, we're on top of social justice. And again, one thing that they saw was a the professional that I had dialogued with mentioned that they hoped to create more in-house programming. So they were definitely on the upswing with that. And the fact that they mentioned that sounded very promising. At the Division II level, same thing over here. It was the student encouragement piece. Informal. If you see something you want to be an activist with, or you see something that surprises you or that you want to learn more about, get involved with it. Get involved with your Black Student Union. Talk about social justice on your social media, and we'll show you how to do that. Same thing at the Division III level, but again, really good findings, I would say, with this departmental action statement, this partnership with their multicultural student affairs office, and these intentional staff development and monthly trainings. They also had a really cool voting initiative, which the NJCAA institution shared. And so NJCAA institution, same thing, really great student encouragement. And the NAIA shared from one institution, they shared, again, this hope to create in-house programming. So I'm going to give you all 20 seconds to take a picture of this, and I'm going to give you that same amount of time to pop something that you think would be worthwhile to put in the chat regarding what your institution might do towards social justice programming for your student athletes. I'm going to give you another 10 seconds to do that. Okay, fantastic. Let's keep going. I'm going to clear these. And so ultimately what I arrived at are 3 recommendations for practice. And so the 3 recommendations that I have for practice are as follows. Okay, developing institutional partnerships, recommendation numero uno. So how can institutions, athletic departments, and practitioners do this? So not only can professionals develop and improve relationships with their campus constituents, including campus services, multicultural office equivalents, and campus constituencies that operate with mental health and counseling in mind, but they need to build partnerships with them for programming needs. So just developing institutional partnerships, not only to cover programming in some instances, but hopefully to fortify programming and hear from professionals who are doing this full time with, let's say, mental health counseling. I think this is a really important piece to include in there. So this is where we need to meet. Athletic departments and campus constituents, we need to meet here. I did a little meme in here, as you all can see. So I'm going to give you all 10 seconds to take a picture of this as well. Okay, so that was my recommendation number 1, developing institutional partnerships and starting to fortify those. Not only developing them, but maintaining them is incredibly important to that piece as well. Recommendation for practice number 2, I accidentally wrote it as number 3 over there, I apologize, is growing local community partnerships. So how are we exposing students to what is going on in their own backyards, what's going on in our communities? And so growing local community partnerships is going to be the avenue to do this. I put this Shia LaBeouf meme right here, but more importantly, look at this Venn diagram. Here's you, and here's the community partners, and we want to be here. And so how can institutions, athletic departments, and practitioners optimize things such as civic engagement and, nudge student athletes to fully support their communities? This approach really helps, indirectly with things such as career identification. A student athlete might come into an opportunity and be like, you know what, maybe I want to go into social work. Maybe I want to work with other student athletes. Maybe I want to work with elementary school populations. And so this approach helps in the indirect sense, but it also helps in the direct sense that, the institution is becoming engaged in their community and they're not just siloing themselves off. So another thing that could be improved on this idea is the use of more assessment and evaluation. I'm going to underline that. Assessment and evaluation from institutions. I think one thing that I saw that was interesting is not a lot of institutions were really benchmarking their stuff. It was very much, we've always done this. This is what we've done the past couple of years. The adaptive programming in some cases, even though there was really great stuff going on, I think this research piece is going to be very helpful in the future with this, not only with growing local community partnerships, but for everything we do regarding student athlete development programming. I'm going to give you all 10 seconds to take a picture of this. Okay. And my last recommendation for practice that I found quite interesting and that I arrived at was a focus on dynamic programming. And so even though this one might seem a little vague, let me implore you all to some of my thoughts on this. So I think we need to strive to be adaptive and not reactive. We need to think about incremental models, and we need to compose identity-focused programming. So whether that is a 10-week speaker series with those locations in mind, whether that's directing students, who identify as Black or not, to attend the Black Student Athlete Summit, whether that is another avenue that you find to be a point of dynamic programming. We need to be here. Athletic department and preemptive topics, we need to be here. And so examples of this might be, this incremental life skills modeling, or a departmental action statement on social justice. The HBCU institution, connected students to identities other than their athletic ones. At the NCAA Division I Power 5 location, they offered additional mentoring for female student athletes who expressed that need. And so as more issues on social justice, mental health, student athlete trauma, all of these topics arrive, we need to continue to meet students where they are and give them the tools to engage, reflect, and grow. Okay, well, this is my last slide. I'm going to give you all a couple seconds to glean my information, my email, my cell phone number. You can reach me anytime of the day, and my LinkedIn as well if you'd like to connect further. And I'd be more than happy if anyone is interested to share out that report that I did. It's about a 20-page report, but it has some really nice tables in there and some really great things with that. And the last thing that I'm going to ask you all to do, this is going to take about the last 5 minutes of this. I want you to find someone that you do not know. I want you, because you all have your institution's names on there, which I hope you all did, I want you to go into the chat, message someone privately. I want you to connect with someone and learn what they're doing, and try to find an institution maybe you haven't heard of. So what the real point of this was to get people engaged with what's going on outside, the lenses that we tend to think about when we think athletics. I would challenge you to think, have I talked to someone that's at an NJCAA institution at the community college level? Have I talked to people that are, at Christian institutions or in the NAIA? I would give me a thumbs up if you have actually done that. If you've talked to people outside the NCAA, who work in athletics and seen kind of what they do. So I'd encourage you in the last 2-3 minutes to connect with someone via chat, see what's going on with them, just make the introduction at the least now, and attempt to learn from them. Does anyone have any questions for me before we end the session? We got another 5 minutes or so, but if you have any questions about kind of the work I did on that, or maybe where the future of this project might go, I'd be all ears and happy to take those questions. Don't be shy. Bueller.
I definitely appreciate the information. I think that I loved all of your levels. I actually work in the 3C2A, which is the other junior college organization that only in the state of California.
Yes, fantastic.
And we have a lot of work to do. And so I really appreciate seeing it all put in one place. And are you going to share your actual article, the actual research?
Yeah, I actually had put it up for publishing. So hopefully it'll be shared out in the form of actually being published. But
That's
if
awesome.
you want that, my information is at the top of the chat. I'll put it at the bottom of the chat now, just so you all have it. And I'd be more than happy to send that over to you if you would like. I'd be happy to talk with you about that. Which institution are you at? You're at Orange
Coast College. Yeah, we're in
Coast College. Where is that?
In Southern California.
Oh, great place to live. Yeah. Right by the beach, right?
Yep. But there's a lot of work to be done at the California community colleges. So much of it is associated with lack of funding, but I think we're at the point now where we have to stop making that excuse and come up with solutions.
So that's something really important that I saw. The junior colleges were doing just as great, if not some better things than your Division I Power 5 institutions even. And so that's kind of what the point of this was to do. Me being an N4A, fantastic organization, very Division I, very Power 5 heavy. I think I met very few people who, were working at institutions other than NCAA Division I institutions in that organization so far, just through some meetings I've attended. Myself, I volunteered when I was an undergrad at Florida State. I worked at Tallahassee Community College for 2 years. It wasn't just a low resource institution, it was a no resourced institution. And so we did very much with very little. Everything from financial literacy workshops to social media management practice and spotlights. So super interesting things to think about. And thank you all so much for giving me some of your time this afternoon. Have a safe conference. Continue to stay safe with COVID. And I hope you all have a really productive rest of the conference. Thank you all so much.
Just real quick, I'm going to share my screen with a QR code. If you could just scan this with your camera and just complete the evaluation. Also, if you could complete the evaluation for previous sessions that you have attended, that would be great, and we would really appreciate that. And that was a great presentation, Zach.
Thank you, Samantha. Appreciate your help on everything. Definitely send me those screenshots. You got my email and everything. That'll be awesome.
Yes.
Zach, I'd love to connect more. I'll reach out to you with like an email. So I'm,
Yep.
I'm at USC. I'm actually an assistant learning specialist.
Fantastic.
I'm looking at more grad school for an MBA. I'd really like to go into athlete development. And my current graduate project through my program or my graduate program is actually doing community libraries, if you're familiar with those. And so I'm just looking at ways, I guess, that I could develop that into a student athlete development, community outreach type program.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, those topics are super pertinent. So, looking back on this, like libraries is an awesome thing, like campus libraries or like department-based libraries, even something like I'm doing a project for my policy class on like student athlete food insecurity. So honestly, my work isn't looking that great, but I'm reading some really well put together information.
Yeah, I'll send you some information too. Actually, there's a organization that I volunteer with out here in South Central that works with food insecurity.
Fantastic. And you're at USC in LA, right?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Tell Kim I said hello.
You know Kim Gross?
Yes.
Awesome. I love her.
Yeah, she's great. She's doing some good work.
All right. Thank you, Zach.
Thanks, Katie. Appreciate it.
All right.
Any other questions, thoughts, concerns, things I can improve in the next iteration of this? Looks like everyone's left, which is fine. Toodles. Bye.
Okay, I will send you the email with the screenshots.
Yes, please. Thank you so much.
No problem. Okay, I am going to end the meeting.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I'm going to head out and do some more work myself. So thank you so much for your time.